My mind is upset. I can change my mindset. Do not be thrown offset. Rumor time reset. Rumor time.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Vanessa Kelly Brew, and we would like to say welcome to you all once again to the ARC podcast. I am one of your hosts for this evening.
And hello, good evening. My name is George W. Prosper, and I'm also a host for this podcast, and I'm excited to be with you this evening.
All right, and I am Dr. Yvonne Marie Laria, and I am one of your co-hosts for the Access RUMERTIME Conversations podcast. And with us this evening, we have Jay. Jay is our special guest, and she will introduce herself at this time.
Good evening. My name is Jay PD, and I am a grateful recovering addict. I would like to first let it be known that I work a 12-step program. However, I do not represent that 12-step program at this podcast. The comments and the statements that I will make are not associated or related to my 12-step program. Those are only my ideas and my opinions. I am not speaking on the behalf, and my 12-step program is Narcotics Anonymous. So I am not a spokesperson for that program.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to have you here with us this evening.
Thank
you. We're missing a few of our, co-hosts. And we're going to send a shout out to Dr. Geneva Fleming, Mrs. Lynn Prosper. We miss you guys. But we're going to get right into our topic, and Vanessa is going to lead us in that.
All right, thank you. So this evening, what we would like to talk about is addictions. So we've been talking to you about various topics of from this fallout of COVID-19, and one of our interests is how people who are struggling with addictions are dealing with the fallout from this COVID-19. And so once again, we are very grateful to have with us on this podcast this evening, Jay, to share her experience with us.
Yeah, great. But before Jay starts, I want to say something. I want us to, as we always do, rumerize the RUMERTIME process, right? And so as we're talking about, and as Jay is sharing her story, I want us to be thinking about how we can help, or how we can identify one's thoughts, one's interactions, mindsets, and emotions as they relate to self and others and the situations that we have at hand, right? Which is the COVID-19, and then we have individuals who are experiencing or who are addicted to either food, alcohol, drugs, any other types of addictions that we can think of right now.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what we want to frame this conversation, this Access RUMERTIME conversation in. So Jay, take it away.
Once again, my name is Jay PD, and I am a grateful recovering addict. My disease of addiction started, I can go back to when I was approximately maybe 3 years old, when my mother used to give me the orange-flavored beer aspirin, and it tasted good, and it made me feel a certain kind of way. So I would find myself finding reasons to have headaches. So that my mother would give me the orange-flavored beer aspirin that I so much loved. Well, as time progressed, I no longer needed my mother to give them to me. I knew how to go into the medicine cabinet and get them and self-medicate. I can identify that as being my first occurrence of using a mind, mood, and altering substance. My disease progressed as I matured and got older, In high school, I started drinking liquid libations and smoking cannabis. By the time I went to college, I was smoking more cannabis and more liquid libations, and my disease just blossomed, bloomed, and just went totally haywire. Um, I remember in 1981, I moved to Denver, Colorado. I worked for a Fortune 500 company, and my coworkers used to go into the mountains and invited me one time to go with them. While in the mountains, I had no clue that there was an excursion or a weekend getaway just to indulge in doing illicit drugs. I found myself at the mercy of these individuals because I had no knowledge of how to return back to the city. Um, so I found myself wanting to be a part of, which is really a big component for most people in addiction, always wanting to be a part of or fitting somewhere or fitting in. So I indulged, and as time progressed and the disease progressed, I became not just a part-time or occasional user. I became a substance abuser, and then I became addicted. There are stages that I went through in order to get to the full-blown addiction. As I progressed into my full-blown addiction, I lost jobs, I lost homes, I lost friendships. I had two children at the time, um, who I don't know how I managed to take care of my children. My children were never taken away from me. They never went into the social services or anything of that nature. I came from a family. I'm the youngest of seven. My sisters are doctors and lawyers and executives and what have you, and I was supposed to follow their pathway. However, that's not the path that I chose to go. So,
What are liquid libations? Is it alcohol?
yes, yes.
Oh, okay. I'm like, is this something special or something different?
It's just, sometimes for myself, I'd rather not say the word alcohol. I
Oh,
say the
okay.
word for libation, but I took more on a dry drug as opposed to a liquid drug.
Oh,
So
I see.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I was like, huh.
Yeah, I found myself at the mercy of that drug because that
Mhm.
drug would tell me what to do, when to do it, how to do it, and if I did not, there were repercussions that I
Mhm.
suffered. And some of those repercussions would be body pain, would be mental torture, would be wow, just a lot going on.
Mhm.
And one thing I have come to find out since I have been in recovery that most people who suffer from the disease of addiction also have a mental illness that accompanies the disease of addiction. I am bipolar. I did not find that out until as an adult. I do take medication for that now, which helps me to keep my moods regulated. But I can go back and remember as a child and as a teenager and as a young adult, the extreme, and I mean extreme mood changes that I had. I never knew who was going to come up. I never knew what was going to come out. If you stepped on me, I told the wrong way, it might be, it's okay. Then the next day, I would be enraged at you. So, um, this is a disease that does not discriminate. It doesn't care your color, your ethnicity, your race, your gender, your economic or social economic standards. This disease cuts straight across the board. It does not care. And if anyone thinks that he or she can beat this disease or can manage this disease, they are in for a rude awakening because there is no management and there is no way you can overcome this disease without surrendering and seeking help from someone in a program or an agency.
Mhm. Wow. Thank you, Jay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
How are you experiencing COVID right now then? You've been in recovery now for 19 years, 10 months.
Mm-hmm.
what is this quarantining and social distancing and physical distancing doing to you in terms of your history?
First off, let me say that addiction is a disease of isolation. So the pandemic puts a recovery at risk and intensifies with social distancing. We are, as we talked in my class, we are people of nature who want to be in a company of other individuals. We want to be a part of something. So when I started experiencing the COVID-19, as I shared with my cohorts, I thought about the powerlessness that I felt, that I felt when I first came into the process of recovery. I always thought I had power. And when they told me I had no power, I was totally enraged because I thought that I had the power to overcome this disease, but I didn't. The only time you get power with addiction is when you surrender that power, and then you get the power of choice. So when I started dealing with the COVID-19, I sat back and I thought about my my early days in recovery and the powerlessness. Here it is. This is a disease or a virus that I am powerless over. There's nothing I can do. There's no medication that I could go to Walgreens, Walmart, or any other pharmacy and pick up. I am at the I am at
The mercy?
The mercy. Thank you for that word. I am at the mercy of others. I am at the mercy of this disease, of the God of my understanding, because it does not discriminate. No matter how much money an individual has, no matter what their social economic standard is, no matter where you live, how big your home is, or whatever, we see today that there are those who are suffering. Even the prime minister over in Europe is suffering from COVID-19. The same thing with the disease of addiction. It does not discriminate. So COVID-19 put me in a place that I realized I hadn't been in 19 years, but it was some place I didn't want to be, some place that I felt hopeless and helpless. But I knew, having experienced that before in my life, it gave me, I wouldn't say a step up, but it gave me an opportunity to reflect. Because in order to be effective, you must
be reflective.
That is my line now.
Yes.
I had to go back and reflect on the measures that I took, the things that I did, to recall them and to recapture those moments so that I could get through this COVID-19. And it was because of that that I have sustained. My foundation is solidified. I have had people calling me from all over saying, I'm struggling. I need your help. What can I do?
Yeah.
So from listening to you, it sounds like you left that community from the past that was aiding and abetting you within the realms of your addiction.
Yes.
And now there's a new community of helping people escape the grips of addiction.
Exactly. I moved away from in order for me to get home, it takes an hour to go back to where I came from, which is like 70 miles away from here. But God made a decision to bring me here. I just surrendered because I could no longer live the way that I was living. So I made a choice and a decision to surrender my will, and to come to some place for a new way of life. And I'm grateful for that. And see, out of this COVID-19 will come a new way of life. Life will no longer be what it had been in the past. We will have to make adjustments. There will be new people, new places, new ways to handle situations. There are going to be a lot of newness, for lack of a better word. There will be a lot of things that have changed, and we must be willing to change in order to move on. The same thing when a person coming into recovery. It's all about change.
Mm-hmm. And so this COVID-19 is somewhat thrusting us into new, and the word that has been used over and over, unprecedented, you know, and I would say uncharted territories. What are some thoughts that you have, in addition to what you shared? What are some thoughts that you have that may be similar to some of the thoughts that you had in the past? So some of the thoughts you're having now due to the quarantine that may be similar to some of the thoughts that you had when you were, you know, recently out of recovery. The reason I'm asking is I want to see if we can help listeners who are struggling with any type of addiction to find some common ground and to know that there's hope.
Yes.
And thoughts, as we know, thoughts are the foundations of our interactions, our mindsets, and our emotions, right? They are at the root of that. So if we can tease out, if we can, you know, delineate, if we can separate thoughts from the feelings. You felt powerless. Now let's talk about thoughts, because thoughts influence feelings, mindsets, and interactions. You're smiling. So tell us. But you have something to say.
So I'm going to ask if Jay would hold her answer to that question until we come back from our break.
Are you and your family seeking healthy mindsets, actions, relationships, knowledge, emotions, resources, and skills? Well, backed by popular demand, GC Squad presents RUMERTIME Family Summer Camp, a social emotional wellness program starting June the 14th to the 26th at the venue St. Michael and All Angels Episcopal Church, down to the roots.
The Access RUMERTIME Conversations podcast is brought to you by GC Squad and the Leadership Institute, and your co-host, Dr. Yvonne Murray-Larrier, Dr. Geneva Fleming, Vanessa Kelly-Brew, Lynn Prosper, and Georges Prosper. Thank you for listening. Welcome back to the Access RUMERTIME Conversations podcast.
You know, trust was one thing that is hard to earn, but the first thing that we lose. And early on in my recovery, I didn't know who or what to trust because I heard so much from so many people. And a lot of times, misinformed people give misinformed information. And the same thing is happening right now with this COVID-19. I don't know who to trust, what to believe, because there are so many different people having so many different opinions and so much to say. I don't know who to trust or who to believe. And there are a lot of misinformed people giving out misinformed information. And some of them happen to sit in some very strategic positions in our world. So I really know that trust was one thing that really did, really was difficult for me, and a sense of community. You know, we always want, let me rephrase it. I always wanted to be a part of. I always wanted to be a part of a community. I'm a part of a family. And when I came into recovery, I wanted to be a part of recovery. But I knew that I had to work in order to weed out the good, the bad, the indifferent, in order to make some healthy, sound choices and decisions about the community that I wanted to be in. I had to change my people, places, things, and my playmates. And the same thing what's going on with COVID-19 right now is knowing the community, because the community no longer exists as we knew it in the past. Just from a month and a half ago, the community has changed, because the community that I once knew, I'm now skeptical and leery of, because I could see a smiling face, but I don't know what lies beneath that smile. The same thing in active addiction. Everyone smiled in your face as long as you were allowing them to partake with whatever it is that you had. And in COVID-19, people are smiling, but yet they may still carry that virus. So a sense of community, not knowing where to put your trust, people, places, and things. I can see a parallel between the two of
Interesting. Interesting. So trust.
them. Oh yeah.
Trust is something, is a thought or an idea that shares common ground with active addict and recovering addict and COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
Any does Georges or Vanessa want to say anything about that?
I think for me, like hearing the discussion, like it just makes me stop and just wonder, like how many other people, within those people who have lost the 22 million people who have lost their jobs and have to file for unemployment. I wonder how many of them are trying to figure out, okay, who do I trust when I don't know exactly what to do? Um, the 2,000 people in Texas who are sitting in lines who've never been to a food pantry a day in their life, but now they have to rely on a food pantry. I wonder how many of them are trying to figure out, like, who can I really trust? Right now, I see this addiction, individuals who are struggling with addiction, I should say. This could really be a really tough time because now you don't know who is truly your friend and you don't know who's there to misuse you, and take this opportunity to see what they can gain from you during this time. There are still people who are out there scamming. There's, everyone's trying to wear a mask. And me and Lynn were looking up masks online, and Lynn taught me this thing about just we're looking at the reviews, just making sure that you look at the reviews to see what people are saying within the reviews. So, we're looking at the mask and it looked pretty good. It looked like it would kind of help us. She started looking at the reviews, and then there's a person that says, no, this is a scam. This is a scam. Don't buy this. They won't even send you the item. So then now I'm trying to figure out, wait, we're in the pandemic right now. There's so much going on. Why would someone choose this time right now to disrespect people, steal from people? Why? And I realize it's just part of humanity. And we have to make sure that during this time, like we just like they were saying, we have to make sure that we find those people who are of the same mindset as us, trying to use this time as an opportunity for growth and as an opportunity to better yourself. Because during this time, you can either fall back into old habits and allow the addiction to hug you a little bit tighter, or you can look to the future and create a better plan and start implementing it from right now. For myself, I said I have 15 more pounds to lose. So the gym is closed. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. So I started going to the track. They just closed the track. So I said, you know what? I'm just gonna walk in my neighborhood. It doesn't matter what a lumps I catch or what speed stops that I'm confronted with. I'm going to still find a way for me to accomplish the goal that I've set. And I feel like for now, this is the thing that I wish a lot of people would do. Get if it's that book that you've been meaning to write all along, this is the perfect time to write that book. If it's your addiction that you've been struggling with, you don't know what to do, there are books out there. There are still meetings that you can go to online. There are different ways that you can connect with people to make sure that you get some help. If it's the relationships that were broken from the past, this is a perfect time to reach out to individuals to say, now that I have some time, I've been thinking about you. How are you doing? And to connect with our brothers and sisters who are out there who might be struggling themselves. So I'm just looking at this and hearing Jay talk. I'm seeing the similarities and trying to make sure that as a community, we realize that we are not alone, but we are in this together. But within the confines of being together, you have to make sure that the person that you're with is not a person that you're stuck with, but it's a person that you want to be with because you guys have a common goal of bettering yourself.
Okay. Well, good. Thank you, Georges.
Well, you know what? That's one of the things that I wanted to pick up on is what Georgia said and what Jay said earlier, which I thought was very powerful. And the thing that you had said, Jay, was the fact that you had this sense of needing to belong. And especially during this time, you know, when everyone has to be physically distanced away from each other. And so again, I'm thinking that must be a struggle for people who are still, you know, dealing with the struggle with addictions, is the fact that they cannot be around people who otherwise might be there to help support them. And so I'm wondering, what do you think about that?
You know, Vanessa, you brought up a very good point, because that physical contact, going into a meeting or going into a social event or going to something with under the recovery realm, we make a connection. We know people, we engage with one another. You know, there's a powerful thing that takes place in any of those venues, and it's called a hug. And a hug is healing under grace. And whether people realize it or not, sometimes just a hug is all the person needs. And if you squeeze them tight enough, you can pop everything back into place. So it is important. A lot of people are struggling because early on, what happens is when you are allowed, or when you go to meetings or to different events, a person can see you. Whereas on a video, you can hide behind the scene. I can, you know, manipulate a picture. I can be in Trinidad when I'm actually somewhere else, you know.
Yes. You can do virtual trips.
Exactly. You know, but when you actually make that physical contact and that visual, lay your eyes on someone, you can actually see the growth in an individual. And that means a lot, because people want to be able to identify. See, this is a process of identification. And this is what our literature tells us, that we identify with one another. And as a result of identifying, we take that risk and buy into it and say, if they could do it, so can I. So we're losing a lot of that. And the online meetings, is for those who have a foundation, it's okay. But for those who may be trying to early on start a foundation, it can be a risky point for them.
So I was listening to something recently about what happens, and I think this kind of happens in most meetings. But one of the features of the support groups is that after the meetings, people usually hang around and talk and chat, and they continue sometimes the discussion, or just visiting with each other. And translating that to online is somewhat of a challenge. It can still be done, but it's not as organic. And I'm assuming that people who are just beginning that recovery process and just entering into their 12-step programs, and not having that physical contact could throw people back into addiction, right? Addictive behaviors.
Oh, behavior.
Yeah. What would you say, Jay, to people in that space?
You know, it has always been said, the meeting after the meeting, going out for coffee or something and carrying over the conversation. It is extremely important for an individual early on to establish what is known as a network, and try to get a network of individuals, hopefully within a certain mile radius or proximity of to where you live. But you can extend it out to be, a broader or a more larger area. And what that network is, those are people that you can call along with a sponsor. And a sponsor is an individual who has that working knowledge, an individual who you call and you share what your innermost thoughts, because there are only certain things that you share at a meeting. But you can call that individual, that sponsor, or a member of your network and talk to them and help. Hopefully, they should be able to get you through whatever it is, or whatever hindrance or blockage that may be keeping you from making progress in your recovery. But having someone or someone's that you can relate to, call, and process. Processing is so important because we're the type of individuals we'll get things in our head and we'll stuff and stuff and stuff, and before we know it, we blow up or we'll have to self-medicate because we can no longer handle the things that are going on, the thoughts and ideas that are going on, or the perceptions that we think others have of us that are going on.
And would you say that, thank you for that, would you say, and anybody can answer this, right? Would you guys say that, because you started off saying, one of the statements you made is that addiction is a disease of isolation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Addiction wants to get you by yourself. Because if I'm in a room, or if I'm in a room with people who are recovering like myself, or individuals who are there to help me, see, what happens is when I get alone by myself, there's good talk, bad talk. And it all depends on whichever one I feed is the one that's going to have the greater power. And sometimes that bad talk can say, just go ahead, just do what? Nobody will know. Oh, yes, they will. Because your disease, if you don't tell on your disease will tell on you. So it's important to know that when you're alone, what type of thoughts? And they always say an addict alone is in bad company. And they also tell us, do not go up in here by yourself, because when you go up in your thoughts by yourself, an addict entertaining an addict is not a good thing to do.
And so this is like, for me, this is like addictions 101. And hearing it from somebody who has experienced it is really good, because it really supports the RUMERTIME process, the 5-step RUMERTIME intervention, where one of our philosophies is that at the root of interactions or behaviors, at the root of attitudes or mindset, at the root of emotions or feelings are thoughts. That is where it begins. And what Jay has just said confirms that. Your thoughts, what can make or break you. And so in order to change your behaviors, you have to change your thinking. Right? Change your thinking as well as changing your environment. But it has to, in order to change your environment, you have to change your thinking, right? Because
everything starts with a thought.
Everything starts with the thoughts.
You know, Dr. Larrier, you brought up the word root. And that's a very important word in recovery, because a lot of times we have to get to the root source as to why we used in the first place. That's when we go into what is known as our 4th step, where we do a fearless and moral inventory of ourselves. And what we do is we go back and we do a timeline of our life. And we look at all of the things that have transpired up until the day to that particular moment. And as Georges and I were talking earlier, a lot of it has to do with trauma. A lot of individuals were traumatized and not knowing how to deal with things, process things. Once they get that first drug in them, it helps to alleviate, or sometimes helps that pain subside. But until we get to the root of whatever the problem is, just like that dandelion, if you don't get the root, it's going to sprout back up. And that's why people continually relapse, because they have not done the work to go down and clear the root.
You got to get to the root. You take care of the root and the fruit will take care of itself. Right. And our society is built on focusing on the fruit, focusing on the behavior, focusing on the symptoms, and we believe in symptom management, and it's not, we see, I mean, it is clear, and I don't understand why we don't change our trajectory in how we deal with addictions or other what we call mental health issues. We continue for years to focus on symptom management and expect to get different results, expect to change the trajectory of the 1 in 5, the 1 in 4 adults suffer from some mental health disorder, the 1 in 4 children, youth suffer from mental health disorder every year. And we think that's going to change when we focus on the symptom, or we focus on the behavior, or we focus on the fruit. It's not going to change. And until we change our thinking as a society, people are going to continuously struggle, and we're going to see those numbers continuing to increase. And when we have pandemics like this, or major global societal issues, which is a pandemic, we are brought face to face with the cracks in the system, or the truth of what our system is perpetuating. When we can do differently and choose to not do differently because it's serving some purpose other than alleviating, eradicating human suffering.
It's powerful that you say that, because the one thing I've been thinking is looking at America's way of dealing with Corona, and then look at some of the other countries around the world. I want to say like Canada, our systems, like let's say just for those who are looking to receive their unemployment checks, our system is about 40 years old. No, was made, I think, around 1960s and 1970s. So that's still the same system we're operating under. And then I look at Canada's system. They have about, I think, 9 million people who went on unemployment, and within 2 weeks, all of them were already taken care of. The thought process that I had is, are we maintaining, or are we preparing? Because if we're just maintaining, when an emergency comes, you won't be prepared for it. But if you're preparing and you're making sure that you put something in your reservoir, and you're trying to make sure that you create good habits, when emergency happens, it's not as intense. It doesn't hit you as hard. All of the issues from the past won't rush at you like a wave. But because you've set parameters and you've prepared yourself, when something happens, you can say, you know what, let me go to the contingency plan. But if you're just maintaining and you're not preparing for the future, because at some point in life, crisis will come. Something will happen. And if you're preparing yourself for that, then it will help you during those times. But if you're just maintaining and just allowing it to be, and I'm not saying anything is wrong with just maintaining for the moment, but you have to get to a point where you stop maintaining and start preparing to make sure that you could build a better reserve for yourself, to make sure that the addiction has a less grip on you. So when crisis comes, you can truly see, how far have I stepped away from addiction, and how close have I gotten to liberation, so I can make sure that I can get to the next phase of my recovery. So just hearing that, I'm just seeing all of these things, and it just,
Georges, that was a powerful, I guess it was a question, right? Are we maintaining, or are we preparing for crisis, right? And so we're going to address that question when we come back on the other side of this commercial.
How would you like to take your life coach with you wherever you go? Well, GC Squad can make that happen for you. Purchase the RUMERTIME Guided Activity Journal on Amazon.com or directly from GC Squad's online store at www.org for the price of $19.99. Welcome back to the Access RUMERTIME Conversations podcast.
Welcome back, everyone. When we left the last section here, there was some pretty stimulating conversation that was happening here, and I think some pearls that have been dropped. And one of the things that I thought was a pearl of wisdom is at the root of everything is a thought. Okay, so no matter what we do, at the root of that, the beginning of it is a thought. Mm-hmm. And what Dr. Larrier had said is that if we take care of that root, the fruit will then take care of itself. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that the question that Georges had brought up was asking, are we maintaining or are we preparing for crisis? And so let's get back into the conversation.
All right. I think Jay had something she wanted to say. Jay, what is this you wanted to say?
I just wanted to address what Georges had brought up about maintaining and being prepared. And he referenced the 60s. And that is the time I can remember during the 60s when, as a student in our school system, there was a yellow and black inverted triangle in a circle that said fallout shelter. And at that time, we were taught how to prepare for a crisis because there was a fear of the Cuban Missile Crisis. There was a fear of radiation, as a result of those things. So we were prepared for those particular occurrences in our lifetime. The same thing as a teacher that we do, we prepare our students for storm drills. So we prepare them. The military prepares their soldiers for crises that come up. But I see a lack of preparedness when it does not benefit the main population or those that are in charge. Those that are in the higher ups, the higher echelons, may not always want things to be prepared, but more so maintained. Because then if it's maintained, it is subject to change at any given point in time. But preparedness has a foundation and it is solid.
But I also, and I will add to that, preparedness and maintenance, again, this is foundational to everything. You have to first have a thinking pattern, and it goes to, how am I thinking about this situation? What's my mindset about this situation? How do I value the people in my quote unquote kingdom? Do I think they're worth me preparing for, or helping them to be prepared? Or do I think they're worth just being maintained, or situations just being maintained? And depending on what side you fall into, what camp you fall into, that's where that's how you're going to behave, right?
It's true.
So like I said earlier, one of the things I said earlier was, behind every behavior, there's a belief. And so if your behavior is about preparedness, if we trace that, if we follow, you know how they say follow the money?
Yes.
Right. If you follow the behavior to the root, we will see what that belief is. Right? So when you see a behavior, don't just look at the behavior in isolation. Always go to the root. Trace that behavior. Trace it. What is the thinking behind that? What's the mindset behind that? What are the thoughts behind that? And I think that is going to help us. One of the things that will help us do is make better decisions and make better choices. But it will also help us, and Jay talked about earlier about trust. It will also help us to determine who and what we can trust, because now we have a process. We have a 5-step process, to help us determine and decide, how do I trust this person? Do I trust this system? Do I trust this establishment? Do I trust this message? Because you're using, okay, let me recognize what the thoughts are. What are the thoughts? Let me understand where those are coming from. Let me figure out a way to manage the mindsets, or the expressing and reflecting on one's thoughts, interactions, mindsets, and emotions. So there's lots of information. There's information overload, and it is creating a lot of anxiety, a lot of confusion, a lot of chaos, a lot of uncertainty. And if we don't have at the onset the skills to navigate simple problems, when problems become complicated, we lose trust, we lose calm, we lose hope, we lose purpose, we lose vision, and our wellness, our sense of wellness suffers.
Yes. Okay. All right. Well, we really have come to the end of our of this ARC podcast, and I will tell you that I have really enjoyed this conversation that we've had this evening. Jay, thank you so much for your willingness to come on and talk with us about addictions during this time. You've shed a lot of light on us, and I think, as Dr. Larrier has said earlier, this is like addictions 101. Right? And so, but there are so many people who are dealing with this. And it has been, just dealing with this issue in itself, but it has been compounded by the time that we are in, right? This whole COVID-19, where everyone is being, has to physically distance themselves. And, we've talked earlier about how you that the wanting to be a part of something is like such a strong feeling for a lot of people who are struggling with addictions, and they are finding themselves isolated during this time. So again, we thank you for coming on and shedding some light on this for us. And yes. So there.
Thank you. Right. Thank you so much, Jay. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure.
Yes, it was really a pleasure getting to know you and hearing your story. And we hope that your story continues to help others. And we hope that you continue to help others deal with their addiction and their struggles.
Recovery is my life.
Awesome.
Yes.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And Yvonne, I'm going to ask you, Jay, we normally end our podcast by giving like words of wisdom, some pearl. And so I am going to ask that this evening, Yvonne, if there is something that you would like to leave with our listeners. And definitely we want to let them know how to get in touch with us if they have any further questions.
I think we can all give our 10 seconds of pearls.
Okay.
Yeah, I why am I getting all the pressure?
You're so wise.
Oh no, don't put that on me. I think we all have wisdom from our own spirit. So as Vanessa said, go ahead.
Well, I will go first, and I hope that I'm not stealing anybody's I don't know, words of wisdom, but you actually, Jay, shared this with us this evening, and I like that, and I am going to use this too, is you gave us the definition of hug, right? Healing under grace. Healing under grace, and I love that. And so this is something that I think that we can all practice just in our daily walk, right, with each other. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you for having me.
So Jay, do you have a pearl?
I just want to say it's an excerpt taken from Narcotics Anonymous, and it's called "We Do Recover." It says, "When at the end of the road, we find that we can no longer function as a human being, either with or without drugs, we all face the same dilemma. What is there left to do? There seems to be this alternative: either go on as best we can to the bitter ends, jails, institutions, or death, or find a new way to live. We do recover."
Wow, powerful. Yes. Georges, do you have your wisdom?
Your pearl.
My small pearl is for us to continue to work together as a community. During this time, there are a lot of people that you know personally who might be affected by COVID-19. Allow your humanity to extend a loving hand and help the person. Not just with their addiction, but just with life.
And I'm going to end.
Wonderful.
I'm going to end with wrap this up with the Serenity Prayer. And if you want to join us, those who know it, and it says, "Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
God grant me the
serenity
to accept
the things that
I cannot
change.
The courage change the things
I can, and the wisdom
to know the difference.
Just for today.
Just for today. All right.
To our listeners, if you would like to get more information on the Access RUMERTIME Conversations show, please email us at arc_podcast@gcscored.org. Again, arc_gcscored.org, and leave us a message, send us an email. Look for us on different platforms. We will have this information on Facebook, on YouTube. You can listen to our podcast and follow us. Give us comments. Let us know how we're doing. And if you have any ideas or suggestions for topics, please send us an email at arc_podcast@gcscored.org.
You have been listening to the Access RUMERTIME Conversations podcast, where the time is always rumor time, where we equip you to solve your problems one rumor at a time, where we educate you to transform your stories one rumor at a time, and where we empower you to become your own life coach one rumor at a time. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.